In this episode of Dead Card Game Reviews, I'll be talking about the MegaMan trading card game. It's based on the NT Warrior anime that was in turn based on the Battle Network Game Boy Advance games. Just hopping right into the rules. You start with a 60 card deck, which includes your Navi, so it's really a 59 card deck plus your Navi, which starts out in front of you. It's the only character card you're gonna have in the whole game. Everything else is just resources, events, battle chips. We'll get into it. Navis have 3 stats. They have strength, defense, and blast. We'll get into what blast is later as well. Your starting hand is 4 cards. Max hand size is only 5. And a turn consists of 4 phases: the draw phase, resource phase, main phase, and battle phase. The draw phase has 3 steps. It's power up, which is you take the top card of your deck and put it face down into your power gauge without looking at it. Then you draw a card, and then you immediately discard down to 5 if you have more than 5 cards in your hand. During your resource phase, you can play up to 4 resources from your hand. Then it goes to the main phase, where most of you'll be playing events, spending resources, which we'll get into spending. Play up to 1 battle chip. You only get 1 battle chip a turn. And blasting if it's your turn. You cannot blast during your opponent's turn. Then it's the battle phase, which pretty much just happens when both players are done playing cards for the turn. Compare the strength of the turn player's Navi to their opponent's defense, and the difference is dealt as damage to the defending player. When a player takes damage, they put that many cards from the top of their deck into their discard pile. The way to win in this game is to mill out your opponent, and there is no other way to win. There's no Exodia, there's no Felidar Sovereign, nothing. There's literally just one single win condition in this game. A player loses as soon as they have no cards in their deck. Not when they have to draw from an empty deck or anything, just as soon as the last card leaves their deck, they lose. So, getting into battle chips, you can play 1 battle chip a turn, both on your own turn and your opponent's turn. Battle chips are basically just really powerful buffs, usually. Most of the time they're increasing strength or defense. Sometimes they do other things, but that's the main thing they do. Blasting. So you can blast once per turn on your turn. To blast, you reveal the rightmost cards in your power gauge equal to your Navi's current blast number, and then pick one of them and add its blast destiny to your Navi's strength. Every card has a blast destiny in the top corner. They made it really big. It's real obvious to see because it's so important. There are 2 costs to playing a card. Not every card has both costs, but there are basically 2 types of resources. You have actual resources, they're cards called resources, and they basically meet the color requirements for playing cards. Cards will often require specific colors of resources to be in play in order to play them, and the second cost requirement you have to meet is power. So the power gauge can have a maximum of 5 cards in it. It's just a generic resource. It doesn't have any color to it. It's just like 1 to 5. These resources aren't like resources in other games. You're not paying anything, you're just meeting a requirement. You can have up to 4 resources in play. There are 4 colors of cards in this game, and if a card requires a resource to play it, it'll specify the color of that resource that it needs in order to play it. Getting into mechanics. You can only have one copy of each resource in play. So if you have a resource in play, you can't play another resource with that same name until you get rid of the first one. You can have up to 4 copies of each card in your deck. Resources often have a spend cost to activating their abilities, which basically just means you discard it from play. So that's mainly how you're going to be getting rid of your resources, so you can play more of that same one if you want to play multiple of the same resource. Cards and effects resolve as soon as they are played or activated. There's no responding in this game. So one player plays a card, it resolves, then their opponent gets an opportunity to play a card, it resolves, goes back to the first player to play another card, it resolves, or spend a resource to activate its ability. So players will go back and forth like that until both of them pass, at which point it goes to combat. And as I said before, you'll compare the strength of the turn player's Navi to their opponent's Navi's defense. A player holds priority as long as they're playing resources. So as I said, you can play up to 4 resources in a single turn. In between playing each resource, your opponent does not get to play anything. So you're just holding priority that whole time. Your opponent does not get to play anything until you play something to start your main phase. For the most part, green likes to draw, red likes to buff, blue likes to control, and yellow likes to ramp. Green also searches the deck, red also burns, blue also decreases blast, and yellow messes with your opponent's power gauge and resources. Some Navis have an effect, and it'll usually be a triggered ability. Some cards require a specific Navi in order to play them, and if they do, they'll have that Navi's symbol where any resource requirements would be to play that card as well. And some even require you to have other resources that have that Navi's symbol on them. When meeting those requirements, the color of the resource doesn't matter, it just has to be a resource that has that Navi symbol in it. So every turn you have to power up before you draw. If your power gauge is full when you go to power up, you discard the leftmost card, shift the other 4 to the left, and then power up. Recharging is putting a random card from your discard pile onto the bottom of your deck. That's kind of the healing in this game, since your deck is your life. Okay, getting into card layout. The different colors of the cards are really easy to differentiate. Battle chips stand out, which is really important since you only get to play 1 a turn. Navis have a good layout that suits their function while allowing for full artwork, which is really cool. When initially viewing a card, someone might assume that the Blast Destiny number is the cost of the card, but once you start learning the game, it kind of makes sense why it's so large and where it is, and why the resource requirements and power gauge requirements are in the places that they are on the card, because it would really clutter up the card if they went anywhere else. And Blast Destiny needs to be so large because it's such an important mechanic. Getting into the artwork, so aside from the Navis, which are original art, everything else in the game is a screenshot from the NT Warrior anime. So some of the images are kind of grainy. And that's because this game was based specifically on the NT Warrior anime and not on the Battle Network video games. So it makes sense that they would use screenshots from the anime. So my conclusion, this game's not very well known, or it would be a lot more popular. I've mentioned it to tons of MegaMan fans who had no idea that this game even existed. I play this game very often. The only place this game loses points for me is that it's not draftable because of the Navi requirement. You can't play without a Navi, and it makes it really hard to draft because you might just not get a Navi. Or you can end up with cards you can't play because you need a specific Navi in order to play them. It just doesn't work. But other than that, it's a really great game. It's one of my favorite Dead card games. Yeah, it's a really good game. I definitely recommend it. It's a lot of fun. Even if you don't like MegaMan, the mechanics, just the the basics of the game are so good. It just works so well. Yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching.